I don't remember the exact moment the truck slammed into my car. I only remember the aftermath, the blood, the sirens, the way the ceiling of the hospital room became my sky for weeks. They told me I was lucky that most people don't survive accidents like that. Spinal trauma, two fractured ribs, a shattered femur, and a long, slow road back to whatever normal was supposed to look like. At first, I believed them. I felt lucky. I had survived. I was still breathing. But as the weeks dragged on, I realized I hadn't just walked out of the wreckage. I'd stepped into something darker, more twisted than anything I'd ever imagined. The first time I saw her, my wife Melanie, she stood by the hospital bed like a stranger, not a tear in her eyes. Her arms were crossed over her designer coat, and she was on the phone, muttering something about insurance and how everything's going to be complicated now. She barely looked at me. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. I remember reaching for her hand. She didn't take it. Instead, she turned to the nurse and asked, "How long will he be like this?" The nurse gave her a stiff smile and answered politely. Melanie nodded, then checked her phone and muttered something about traffic before leaving. She didn't even say goodbye. That was when it started. The slow, gnawing realization that something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The next few weeks were a blur of painkillers, physical therapy, and nurses with kind but tired eyes. My muscles had atrophied. I couldn't sit up without help. Every movement felt like fire threading through my bones, and yet it was the emotional weight that hurt more. Melanie visited sparingly. When she did, she spent most of the time on her phone. Her words were clipped, cold, no warmth, no encouragement. I tried asking about home, about our son, well, her son technically, my stepson Ryan, but she always dodged the questions or gave me a rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ryan used to call me Dad, used to run into my arms when I came home from work, but now he didn't visit, not once. Melanie claimed he was struggling to see me like this. I believed her at first. I wanted to. But the cracks in the facade widened by the day. I noticed strange things. My credit card had been declined when I tried to buy something small from the hospital gift shop. My bank app showed unusual withdrawals. When I asked Melanie, she brushed it off. Medical bills, obviously. But something didn't sit right. One night, I overheard two nurses talking in the hallway outside my room. They didn't know I was awake. "That's his wife? She never stays more than 15 minutes. I know. And did you see the guy who dropped her off last night? That wasn't her brother." The words clung to me like frost. I waited until the morning and asked the nurse on duty, Tara, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a gentle touch, if she could help me go over some insurance documents. She hesitated, then nodded. When she brought me the papers Melanie had signed, I felt the last bit of warmth leave my chest. She'd listed me as having no income. She'd changed the emergency contact to herself only. She'd also made changes to our joint accounts, transferring my shares of certain investments to her name under the guise of simplification. Tara looked uncomfortable as I stared at the papers. I tried to hide my shaking hands. She must have seen something in my eyes, because she leaned forward and whispered, "You might want to talk to someone outside the hospital. Do you have family nearby?" My sister, Claire. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Melanie never liked her, said she was too nosy, too intense. But that night, with Tara's help, I called Claire. I told her everything I knew. I left out some parts, mostly the pain in my chest that had nothing to do with broken ribs. Claire showed up the next day. She came in like a storm, fierce, loving, and furious. She took one look at me, pale and sunken into the hospital bed, and tears sprang to her eyes. "You should have called me sooner," she whispered, brushing my hair back. She spent the next few hours going through paperwork, bank statements, and emails on the hospital computer with Tara's quiet help. Her face went from concern to stunned to livid. "She's draining you dry," Claire muttered, "and I think she's preparing to leave you." That night, I couldn't sleep. My body ached, but the pain in my soul was sharper. I thought of Ryan, how he used to call me in the middle of the night after a nightmare, how he'd begged me to teach him how to ride a bike. Now he wouldn't even answer my messages. 2 days later, Melanie visited again. She looked flawless, as always. Her lips were painted red, her nails done. No signs of stress. No signs of grief. I talked to the doctors, she said, adjusting her coat. They said you might be moved to a rehab facility soon. We'll find a good one. A rehab facility? I asked, voice rough. You'll get better care there. More privacy. And where will you be? I asked. She paused. At home, with Ryan. Life still has to go on. I stared at her, and for the first time, I didn't recognize her at all. The next few days, Claire helped me make arrangements. The doctor approved my discharge into outpatient care, and Tara pulled strings to get me into a hotel with accessibility support rather than a rehab facility. Claire said it was safer that way. I didn't tell Melanie right away. I wanted time, space, a chance to think. At the hotel, I had my own room, privacy, and a new phone, one Melanie didn't have access to. Claire stayed in the room next door, and slowly, with physical therapy and quiet determination, I started rebuilding. Tara came by once a week, even though she had no obligation. She said she just wanted to check in. She was the first person besides Claire who looked at me like I mattered. One night, as I struggled to take a few steps with a walker, Tara stood beside me and whispered, "You're stronger than she thinks. Whatever she's hiding, it'll come out. People like that always leave a trail." And she was right. Claire had hired a private investigator. "Just to be sure," she said. The photos arrived a week later. Melanie dressed in designer clothes, stepping out of a black sedan. The man who opened the door for her, tall, well-dressed, put his hand on her lower back like he'd done it 100 times. They went to a restaurant, then a hotel. Melanie's betrayal wasn't a wound anymore. It was an infection, spreading, festering, and pushing me to do something I'd never thought myself capable of. Revenge. But not the kind with screaming or violence. No, I wanted her to feel what I felt. I wanted her to lose the security she thought she'd stolen. To watch the walls of her perfect life crumble one by one, carefully, quietly, strategically. The first step was to reclaim what she'd taken. Every cent, every document, every signature she'd forged under the assumption I wouldn't notice. With Claire's help and the investigator's documentation, we built a case. The next step? Returning home. Not to stay, but to reclaim it. Melanie didn't know I'd left the hospital. She didn't know about the hotel, or the investigator, or the nurse who kept every document she'd tried to sneak past me. And when I returned, weeks later, walking slowly but without assistance, she opened the door with an expression I'll never forget. Surprise, followed by fear, and then barely concealed rage. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming home?" she asked, voice low. I smiled. "Because I wanted to see your face when I did." The silence between us stretched thin, like a tightrope over a pit of everything we weren't saying. Melanie stood there in the doorway, eyes darting from my face to the walker I no longer needed, then to the suitcase Claire was wheeling in behind me. Her expression flickered, a perfect storm of confusion, annoyance, and calculation. "You should have called," she said again, stepping aside stiffly to let us in. "I wanted it to be a surprise," I said, my voice calm. "After all, you said this was still my home." Claire walked past her without a word, placing the suitcase by the base of the stairs. She looked around the house like she was examining a crime scene, and in a way, she was. I could see the changes, new furniture, different decor. My things, the ones that once gave the house a trace of warmth, were either gone or moved. "You redecorated," I said, slowly moving through the hallway. "I thought a fresh start would be good," Melanie replied, "or for all of us." She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't ask how I was standing without support, or why Claire was with me. And I didn't offer those answers. Not yet. We made it to the living room. Claire sat beside me on the couch, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. Melanie lingered by the wall, watching us like she was trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. "I'll have Ryan come down," she said. "He's been asking about you." That was a lie, but I nodded anyway. Ryan came down a few minutes later. Taller than I remembered, but something about his posture had changed. He didn't smile, no hug, just a mumbled, "Hey," as he slumped onto the far end of the couch. I studied his face, looking for the boy who used to trust me, lean on me. All I saw was distance, indifference, maybe resentment. He was 16 now, Old enough to see, old enough to know, but too young to fully understand how manipulation works when it comes wrapped in a mother's voice. I asked him how school was. He shrugged. Claire tried. She asked about his classes, his friends. He answered with one-syllable replies. Melanie returned with coffee for everyone, except me. She didn't even pretend to forget. Just walked in, handed Claire a mug, and sat in the chair across from us like a guest in her own home. Claire sipped the coffee without a word. I leaned back, trying not to betray the strain it still put on my body. Weeks of rehab had strengthened my resolve, but not my bones. I've been thinking about our finances, I said, watching Melanie carefully. She stiffened, ever so slightly. Oh? Yes, I'd like to go over everything. Insurance, bank statements, joint assets. Melanie smiled, but it was thin and brittle. That's not really necessary. I've been handling everything. I know, I said. That's why it is necessary. She looked between Claire and me as if realizing for the first time that I wasn't as helpless as she assumed. There was an edge in my voice she hadn't heard in years. Quiet, controlled, but full of intent. I'll get the documents later, she said, her tone still breezy. You should rest. I've had weeks to rest, I replied. Now, I want answers. Melanie stood and excused herself. Ryan left shortly after, claiming he had homework. Claire stayed beside me, silent until the house was quiet again. She's hiding something, she said. I know. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed that no longer felt like mine and stared at the ceiling. I could hear her moving around downstairs on the phone. Low whispers. I imagined the man from the photos. I imagined her slipping into that same black sedan while I was hooked to IVs and learning how to walk again. I imagined her laughing, sipping wine, kissing him. And I imagined all the lies she'd told Ryan, painting me as a burden. A man better left behind. The next morning, I asked her directly, "Who is he?" She froze halfway through buttering toast. Excuse me? The man you've been seeing. The one who picks you up in the black car. Her eyes narrowed. You've been spying on me? No, I said. But you left a trail. She dropped the knife onto the counter with a clatter. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough. Claire walked in right then, her timing eerily perfect. She placed a thick folder on the kitchen island. Melanie looked at it like it was a grenade. What is that? Melanie asked, her voice sharper now. Records, Claire said, bank statements, email printouts, photos, and a copy of the lawyer's letter we'll be sending. Melanie's composure cracked. Just a little, but enough. You're trying to take everything from me, she hissed. After everything I've done to keep this family together. To keep your version of the family together, I interrupted, by manipulating, lying, and preparing to abandon me the second I was no longer useful. She looked like she wanted to scream. Instead, she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the kitchen. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. With Claire's help, I'd already secured a copy of the marriage agreement, the documentation of the financial changes Melanie had made, and evidence of the affair. We were careful. No dramatics, no threats, just facts, all collected and waiting. We prepared paperwork to freeze the joint accounts. I transferred the hotel recordings and notes into digital folders. The investigator had even uncovered that Melanie had recently met with a divorce attorney under a fake name. By the end of the week, I had legal standing to challenge every transaction she made during my recovery. The house? Still legally half mine. The investment account? She'd need to answer for those forged authorizations. And as for Ryan, I made sure to request mediation, not revenge. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted him to know the truth. The confrontation wasn't loud. It wasn't filled with screaming or accusations. It happened over dinner. Claire cooked. I insisted Melanie sit. Ryan sat between us, clearly confused. I wanted to explain something, I said, pushing a folder across the table. This contains a timeline, my recovery, the accounts, the lies, and the affair. Melanie's hand trembled slightly as she picked it up. Ryan looked between us, suddenly alert. What are you talking about? Your mother has been seeing someone else, I said gently. while I was in the hospital. She changed our finances without my consent. She told lies to keep me away. I have the proof here. Ryan looked at Melanie. Is that true? Melanie didn't answer. She couldn't. Claire reached out and placed a hand on mine. Steady, reassuring. Ryan stood slowly and left the table. No tantrum, no drama. Just quiet footsteps up the stairs. Melanie looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not of me, but of everything she stood to lose. You won't win, she said, voice low. You think people will believe you? After everything I've done to keep this family going? I'm not here to win, I said. I'm here to take back what's mine. She stood up, her face pale, and left the room. Claire and I sat in silence for a long moment. The clock ticked behind us. You did it, Claire said softly. Not yet, I replied, but almost. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and soon justice, quiet, cold, and long overdue, would arrive at her door. The morning light filtered through the bedroom blinds, casting long bars of gold across the floor. I sat at the edge of the bed, tying the laces of my shoes, something I hadn't been able to do for weeks without assistance. The ache in my back still pulsed with every movement. But the pain no longer defined me. It reminded me I'd survived. I was still here, and I wasn't done yet. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Melanie had left early, again, without a word. Claire was in the kitchen, calmly making tea, as if we weren't living in the middle of a storm, barely contained by civility. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes warm with pride. She didn't have to say it. I saw the acknowledgement in her expression. I was reclaiming myself, one deliberate step at a time. Later that morning, my attorney called. The financial review had yielded even more than we expected. Melanie hadn't just mismanaged money. She had siphoned funds from joint accounts into a separate one under her sister's name. The digital trail was easy to follow once we had the right permissions. Forged documents, backdated withdrawals, even a real estate inquiry under a pseudonym. She hadn't just planned to leave me, she'd been preparing to erase me. Do you want to press charges? The attorney asked. We have more than enough evidence. I sat in silence for a moment. The answer was yes, but not yet. There was one more truth that needed to come out, and I wanted her to see it unfold in real time. Not in a courtroom, but right here, in the house she tried to claim as hers alone. I'm going to give her a chance to confess first, I said, but have everything ready. Claire drove me to the private investigator's office that afternoon. He'd gathered a final piece of evidence I'd asked for, a copy of Melanie's private messages with the man she'd been seeing. It wasn't just a fling. They were planning a future, one that didn't include Ryan, and certainly not me. She had referred to me as a fading memory and a problem that would solve itself. Reading those words didn't hurt as much as I expected. They just solidified what I already knew. But what struck me most was one particular line. She'd written it 3 days before I was discharged from the hospital. He'll never walk again. I won't be tied down by his guilt. We deserve more. That was the final nail. I returned home with a plan. The confrontation was set for Saturday night. Claire helped arrange it. We invited Melanie and Ryan to a family dinner. No confrontation, no tension, just a let's talk evening. Melanie, either overconfident or simply unaware of how much ground she'd lost, agreed. She arrived late, dressed in a new outfit, her hair styled like she had somewhere better to be. Ryan followed her in quieter than usual, his expression unreadable. Claire had already prepared dinner. The table was set for 4. We ate in silence for a few minutes. I could feel Melanie scanning the room for signs of a trap. She sensed something. Claire broke the quiet. We've been going through some old photos, she said. Do you remember this one, Ryan? She held up a framed picture of us at the beach, taken a few years ago. Ryan smiled faintly. That memory still lived inside him, untouched. Melanie rolled her eyes. Oh, what is this? Nostalgia night? No, I said. It's reminder night of what we had and what was nearly destroyed. Her jaw tightened. I think we should talk, I continued, setting down my fork. About the money, about the lies, about the man you've been seeing. She laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. Are we really doing this again? Claire placed the folder of evidence on the table, slowly sliding it toward Ryan. Open it, I said, not taking my eyes off Melanie. You deserve to see the truth for yourself. Ryan hesitated. Melanie reached for the folder, but Claire stopped her with a single look. Slowly, Ryan opened it. At first, he just flipped through the papers, financial statements, screenshots, dates, and names. Then he saw the messages, his face drained of color. Mom? He asked, voice cracking. Melanie stood up abruptly. That's enough. This is manipulation. No, I said calmly. That's documentation. Ryan looked at her, heartbroken. You said he abandoned us. I did what I had to do, she snapped, her voice losing its edge of control. You think I was going to waste my life taking care of someone who couldn't even walk? You're not even pretending anymore, I said, standing slowly. You lied to Ryan. You betrayed our marriage. And you tried to destroy everything I built. Melanie looked at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize. And in many ways, I had. I wasn't the man she left in that hospital bed. I wasn't the easy target she thought she could manipulate and discard. I was stronger now. Physically, emotionally, strategically. I've already filed to contest the unauthorized transfers, I said. The lawyer will be in touch. You can expect an audit. And if you choose to fight this, I'll pursue criminal charges. Her face crumpled then, not with tears, but with rage. You think you're going to take everything from me? She hissed. I'm not taking anything, I replied. I'm reclaiming what's mine. Claire stood beside me, her presence grounding me like it had from the start. Ryan sat frozen, processing the truth. I felt for him. He was collateral damage in a war he didn't start, but he needed to know. Melanie stormed out without another word. The next few days were a whirlwind, legal meetings, bank appointments, mediation requests. Claire helped every step of the way. The house, the assets, even my name on certain documents. Everything was rebalanced. And while Melanie fought tooth and nail through her lawyer, the truth was undeniable. The paper trail buried her. Ryan asked to stay with Claire and me at the hotel for a while. He didn't say much, but his presence meant more than words. One night, as we sat on the hotel balcony watching the city lights, he turned to me and asked, "Why didn't you give up?" I thought about the long nights in the hospital, the agony of rehab, the bitterness of betrayal. And then I thought of the quiet moments of defiance, learning to walk again, gathering evidence, choosing strategy over fury. Because she expected me to, I said, and I decided I wasn't done yet. He nodded slowly, understanding more than I realized. Weeks later, I stood at the front door of the house, the same house she'd tried to make her own without me. She was gone now, legally forced to vacate after a court order. The locks had been changed. The space was quiet, still. Mine again. I stepped inside. Not because I needed to hold on to the past, but because I wanted to choose what came next. I walked through each room, reclaiming them, not with vengeance, but with purpose. I wasn't the broken man she left behind. I was the man who rose, piece by piece, from the ashes she thought would bury me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And now, finally, I had it. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Sometimes justice walked quietly, on steady feet, with a calm heart and eyes wide open.